You hit record on a voice memo, say a single sentence, and play it back immediately. Something in your stomach drops before the sentence even finishes. That's not your voice. Some part of you insists, even though you just watched your own mouth make every sound of it. You reach for the volume button or the delete button, whichever is closer. But the real answer for why is far stranger than simple vanity. Two completely different sound systems have been quietly disagreeing about what you sound like for your entire life. And a recording is the first time you've ever had to listen to the losing side. Here's what's actually happening, physically, every single time you speak. When you talk, sound travels to your ears through two separate paths at once. One path is ordinary. Sound waves leave your mouth, move through the air, and arrive at your eardrum, exactly the way any other sound reaches you. The second path skips the air entirely. Your vocal cords vibrate, and that vibration travels directly through the bones of your skull, straight into your inner ear, a route called bone conduction. Bone conducts low frequencies especially well, which means the version of your voice that reaches you through your own skeleton is richer, deeper, and fuller than the version that leaves your mouth and travels through open air. Everyone else, every single person who has ever heard you speak, has only ever received the air-conducted version. Thinner, higher pitched, the real, actual sound leaving your body. You, meanwhile, have spent your entire life listening to a private, bone-boosted remix nobody else has ever heard, and quietly mistaking it for the master recording. Press two fingers gently against your own throat while you talk, and you can feel the vibration directly. The same signal traveling straight up through bone into your inner ear, bypassing the air entirely. That's not a metaphor. That's a second, completely separate delivery system for sound, running constantly, every time you open your mouth. And it has been running that way since before you could form your first word. So why does hearing the real version feel less like correction and more like betrayal? In 1966, psychologists Phil Holzman and Clyde Rousey ran a study built around exactly that reaction. They played people recordings of their own voices and simply watched what happened. The response wasn't neutral curiosity. It was closer to genuine distress, described by participants in terms usually reserved for something closer to shame or violation than mild surprise. Holzman and Rousey called the phenomenon voice confrontation, and the name fits better than voice recognition ever could. It doesn't feel like meeting an old friend. It feels like being confronted by something. The reaction isn't only self-reported either. Follow-up work in this area has tracked genuine physiological arousal during voice confrontation, the kind of measurable stress response usually associated with mild threat, not mere surprise. Your body isn't performing embarrassment for an audience. Something in the nervous system is briefly, sincerely alarmed. There is a partial escape hatch, and it comes from the same mechanism that caused the problem in the first place. Repetition. People whose jobs force them to hear their own recorded voice constantly, radio hosts, voice actors, podcasters, tend to report that the flinch fades with volume of exposure, not through some trick, but simply because the unfamiliar version slowly becomes familiar too. The bone-boosted voice never stops being the default. It just stops being the only version your brain has learned to expect. That distress has a name worth remembering because it points somewhere deeper than acoustics alone can explain. Psychologist Robert Zajonc spent years studying something called the mere exposure effect, the finding that people consistently prefer things they're already familiar with over objectively identical alternatives they haven't encountered as often. It shows up almost everywhere. Perception meets self-image. Show someone a true photograph of their own face alongside a mirror-reversed version of that same photograph, and most people prefer the mirror-reversed one, the version that matches what they see in the bathroom mirror every morning, even though it's the one nobody else in the world has ever actually seen. Their closest friends tend to prefer the true, unreversed photograph instead, the version that actually matches the face they recognize. Two people looking at the exact same set of two images, arriving at opposite preferences, purely because of which version each of them has spent more time looking at. Familiarity, not accuracy, is doing the preferring. Your recorded voice fails that same test instantly. It's accurate. It's also completely unfamiliar, because the bone-conducted version has always outvoted it, every day, for your entire life. That alone might explain the surprise. It doesn't fully explain the flinch. For that, the story needs a second twist, and it comes from neuroscientist John Houde, whose research on speech and hearing revealed something the acoustic story leaves out entirely. As you speak, your brain doesn't just passively receive the sound of your own voice arriving through your ears. It actively predicts it using something called an efference copy, a kind of internal preview generated the instant your brain sends the motor command to your mouth and vocal cords. That prediction arrives almost simultaneously with the actual sound, and the two get compared automatically, below conscious awareness. When they match, your brain quietly turns the volume down on your own voice, a process researchers call speaking-induced suppression. It's the same basic system that stops you from being able to tickle yourself. Your brain already knows exactly what sensation is coming, so it dampens the surprise before it ever fully registers. Houde's work found this suppression happening at the level of the auditory cortex itself, the brain region processing sound, essentially turning down its own sensitivity in real time, specifically for signals it correctly predicted a fraction of a second earlier. Which means the voice you're used to isn't only bone-boosted, it's also actively muted by your own nervous system in real time, specifically because it's self-generated and entirely expected. A recording erases both of those advantages at once. There's no bone conduction adding warmth and depth. There's no efference copy dampening the volume because your brain isn't producing the sound in that exact moment. It's only receiving it, the same way it receives a stranger's voice. For a few disorienting seconds, your own voice gets processed by the part of your brain built for unfamiliar, unpredicted, full volume sound. No wonder it lands like an intrusion instead of a memory. Think about how strange that actually is. The version of your voice you like, the one that feels like you, has never once been available to anyone else on earth. Every friend, every family member, every person who has ever said they love the sound of your voice has been responding to the thin, unboosted, unsuppressed signal you've spent your whole life quietly overruling in your own head. Does that reframe the flinch even slightly? There's a reason this particular discomfort shows up so reliably across cultures, ages, and even species with vocal communication. Researchers studying this pattern have found the same basic startle response in toddlers, first hearing their own babble played back, in elderly adults, in people from cultures with wildly different relationships to recording technology in the first place. It isn't a personal insecurity about pitch or tone or how annoying a voice sounds on tape. It's a genuine perceptual mismatch, two internally generated sound systems briefly losing their tug-of-war at the exact moment a third, unfiltered version gets introduced. The wince isn't a judgment about your voice. It's a nervous system momentarily processing itself as a stranger. Modern life has quietly made this collision far more frequent than it used to be. Video calls, voice notes, podcast appearances, social media clips with autoplay sound. Every one of them forces a small confrontation that for most of human history essentially never happened outside of very specific circumstances, like standing in a canyon and hearing a delayed echo. Your ancestors lived and died having heard their own voice exactly one way, the bone-boosted, self-suppressed way, forever. You now hear the unfiltered version multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day, in a work meeting recording, a birthday video sent around the family group chat, a voicemail greeting you re-record 4 times and still don't like, and your nervous system still reacts to each instance with roughly the same startled unfamiliarity it would have shown the very first time. Because biologically, almost nothing about that internal comparison system has caught up to how often it now gets triggered. Even the people around you are, in a strange sense, permanently more familiar with the real you than you are. Your closest friend has heard the accurate, air-conducted version of your voice thousands of times and has no complicated relationship with it whatsoever. It's just your voice to them. The only person in the room who finds it unsettling is the one person biologically incapable of hearing it the way everyone else does by default. That has a strange upside if you let it. The gap between the two versions of your voice isn't a flaw to fix. It's proof of two separate, functioning systems, each doing exactly what evolution built them to do. One keeping you comfortable and self-assured while you speak, The other keeping strangers' voices properly flagged as new information worth your full attention. The discomfort of hearing yourself on a recording is, in a strange way, the sound of a perfectly healthy nervous system, briefly unable to tell whether the voice belongs to you or to someone standing just outside your own skull. So the next time you catch a recording of your own voice and feel that instinctive urge to stop it, try noticing what's actually happening instead of just enduring it. That flinch isn't your voice failing some kind of test. It's two separate ancient systems disagreeing for a few seconds about who's talking, one built on bone and prediction, the other hearing you completely raw for what might be the first time all day. Nothing about the voice itself changed between the moment you spoke and the moment you pressed play. Only the delivery system did. You hit record again, say the same sentence, and play it back. The drop in your stomach is still there. But this time, you know exactly what it is. Not proof that something is wrong with your voice, but proof that, for one brief moment, you got to hear yourself exactly the way everyone else always has.